Welcome to Massive Passive Cash Flow, the podcast that guides professionals to financial prosperity. Join our community and let's start building your wealth. Here's your host, Gary Wilson.
Welcome back to the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. I'm Gary Wilson, your host, and I'm glad to have you back. If you wouldn't mind doing so, if you haven't already, if you could please subscribe to the podcast. It's on 30 different channels, including the biggie, Apple. So if that's your thing, have at it. And while you're online, go ahead and visit globalinvestoragent.com. The team is growing. These are agents that we've trained to work specifically with you and I, the real estate investor. They're not your typical agents. And if you are an agent, by the way, I would definitely pay attention. Go to the website, and I think there's a place you can click on Learn More and have a conversation, see if this is a match for you, because it's growing fast. It's definitely a necessary market niche to serve that's been underserved for quite a long time. And, you might want to check it out and get yourself positioned for this next market shift. So in any case, without further ado, we got a great guest today, Owen Barrett from beautiful San Diego, California. So Owen, first off, man, thank you so much for doing this. You got an awesome subject, and I can't wait to dig in and educate these folks. So welcome aboard.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
I'm glad you're here. We appreciate your time and sharing your expertise. And if you wouldn't mind, just to keep it, give everybody a little bit of context, would you mind sharing a little bit about who you are and how you got to where you are now in this important niche that you're working in?
Yeah, definitely. I started off in finance. I went to school for finance, ended up in the financial industry, kind of cut my teeth with analysis and Excel, which I love. I'm a self-proclaimed Excel nerd. Then I decided I wanted to move into sustainability, and keep in mind, this is 15 years ago. So there weren't a lot of options at the time. So I went to grad school for environmental science. That launched me into this career as a corporate energy manager. Mm-hmm. So I worked for a Fortune 100 company. My job was to save the company money by saving them energy. So in 3 years, got really all kinds of interesting experience: solar, fuel cells, battery storage, LED lights, anything that saved money, saved energy. Mm-hmm. I quit that to start my own company called Lumio, and took all my experience to help school districts in California. So same idea, save them money by saving them energy. We ended up working with 40 school districts in about 18 months. So exploded pretty quickly. Had my first successful exit, sold to my partners. And that's when I started to get involved in real estate. And at the time, I had no idea that this passion of sustainability and interest in real estate was going to merge. I identified syndications as sort of my preferred investment opportunity. And the first deal I invested in, it was a master meter deal in Texas. And I think the owner spent $130,000 a year in energy. I asked him what he was doing to decrease or eliminate his utility costs, because we all know it goes to NOI. And he said nothing, which I thought was fascinating. So that kind of launched me on this 12 to 18 month kind of just learning period, talking to a lot of big syndicators in the US. What do you guys do about your electricity costs? They all said nothing, which I thought was pretty unique. It's an industry that just hasn't really caught on to the trend of energy management. Mm-hmm. And so I decided that, this is a great opportunity to sort of merge sustainability with real estate investing. Partnered with a real estate investing company out of Omaha. We started buying multifamily properties throughout the Midwest. And that's then led to my most recent venture, which is called Rayven, which is, we'll get into more later, but it's a crowdfunding opportunity all centered around net zero real estate. So it's been a really interesting journey, just kind of constantly building on top of each other to really take it to the next level.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, they're in the world of real estate investing, and there's the small players. Like when I got started, I really literally bought half of a house. I bought it with my college roommate. We split it 50-50. It was a 4-bedroom ranch in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And it wasn't until later I started buying duplexes and triplexes and fourplexes, and eventually got into the bigger properties, a 78 unit, 90 unit, and so forth. And at that point, we got really serious about cost mitigation. So we would replace boilers. I mean, we're talking, several $100,000s in these big buildings, but it saved us a tremendous amount of money. We didn't really consider solar at the time. And I know for some people it's been a challenge, because there's companies, marketing companies, that will approach like homeowners and then offer them some kind of a program where the person doing the installation, they get like the tax credits. And so consumers are baffled by that type of stuff. But this is, to me, makes so much sense because, if I own those properties now, I mean, and looking at the numbers, I look at the stuff ahead of time, it's pretty startling. And it's not at all like, I mean, the technology's improved, but take us through what actually happens. Let's say you've got an investor out there, maybe an engineer that just bought his or her first fourplex. Does it make sense to even take like a fourplex and use solar to reduce costs? Or kind of fill us in, if I can paint that picture and have you fill in the blanks, that would be awesome.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think we initially prided ourselves on building a business model that did not need incentives and did not need tax credits. And this was 5 years ago. And then last year, the Inflation Reduction Act got passed, which is huge. And so we basically had $600 billion basically of incentives, tax credits, and rebates fall into our lap to make what we're already doing more cost effective. So whether you own a house, a fourplex, a 40 unit, or a 400 unit, the average return on cost is 12% across the board. It's higher in states like California, where electricity is really expensive, lower in states like Texas, Kansas, where electricity is really cheap. But unfortunately, I always tell people that solar contractors are the worst, most dishonest type of contractor in the entire sort of construction realm. Okay. There's a lot of dishonesty. There's a lot of just kind of shady sales tactics where people are being oversold panels more than they need. So it is important that you pick a good contractor. But there's a lot of ways now where if you're, you can use PACE financing. So property assessed clean energy financing, where it's essentially attached to your property tax bill. You may have to pay 10%, like a 10% down payment on the cost of the solar. And then the rest is covered by PACE financing around 6%. So you can instantly generate cash flow. If you apply a cap rate to the NOI that you've created, you'll instantly create more value than what the solar costs. And it's still 5 years into this, mind-boggling how few real estate investors and owners are looking at solar as a way to add value, especially being in this kind of down market or, volatile market, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, you mentioned, Texas, Kansas, where energy cheap, California, where it's more expensive. But what about the geography relative to like the climate and number of sunny days and things like that? So I'm right now in Florida at the moment. In Florida, it rains every day, but it's also sunny every day. Talk about rain. California, where you are, I love where you are because my sister used to live in La Jolla. And it's funny because the weather forecast every day was like, well, it's going to vary widely between 72 and 73, and then there might be a cloud.
Yeah.
So, but does that make a difference? Can someone do this in Wisconsin too and still generate?
No, it definitely makes a difference. I mean, ultimately, it's solar irradiance is sort of the technical term of what you're looking at. It's how much UV radiation hits a particular part of the U.S. and it's highest in the Southwest U.S. So sort of San Diego, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, probably through West Texas. Florida, I haven't looked at it specifically, but it's probably pretty high too. But I mean, you're talking about a range of return on costs of, 8% to 18%. So it works everywhere. But to your point, how well it works depends on solar irradiance and cost of electricity. The higher solar irradiance you have, and the higher electricity is, the higher the cost is, the better the economics of solar for your property will be.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, so what's the process? Let's say, tell me about your role. What role do you play primarily, and what do you prefer to do? And also, if someone wants to take advantage of this, are there resources that are available to them where they can maybe do a better job of selecting the contractor and that type of thing? Because I know people are going to be interested. I mean, I'm personally interested,
Yeah. So my role is, I'm an idea guy. I love coming up with new ideas. I have a sort of an interesting skill set at just identifying business opportunities. I'm not the operator. That is not my role. So I like coming up with opportunities, putting all the pieces together, and then bringing the right people together to really execute on it. That's what we've done at Z&E Capital. That's what we've done at Rayven. I mean, it's a team effort. There's people that are out there sourcing the properties. There's people that are out there asset managing them. There's people that are out there sort of managing the solar installation. And so I can help advise anybody on how they should think about solar for their property. In certain instances, we may be able to install solar for them. It kind of depends on how big the project is and where it's located. But I think everyone should at least start thinking about it. Because the other thing that we like to talk about is the effect of solar on your exit value. Eventually, I don't think we're there yet, but it will eventually be higher. Mm-hmm. So if you have two equal properties, identical NOI, the one with solar is going to be in higher demand as this ESG push continues. You know, it gets politicized a lot. I get it. The reality is it's not going anywhere. It's only going to get bigger. Mm-hmm. And right now, 80% of the US economy has a net zero commitment. So if you're an institutional buyer, mm-hmm. a private equity fund, a family office, and you're getting pushed on your ESG, you're going to view properties with solar higher than an equal property without it. So I think we're sort of setting ourselves up for more success 5-10 years from now when we want to exit these properties.
Yeah.
But you know, that's a tough thing to prove today. I just don't think there's data right now to back that up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've got a million questions. So when it comes to technology, has it evolved like in the last generation, or are there significant improvements in innovation and so forth that we can look to? In other words, I'm a data guy too. I mean, my degree is in computer science, so I tend to look at trends. You know, where were we a generation ago? Where were we now? Where are we likely going based on what's being talked about in research and developed? But to me, I mean, I would be shocked if the rest of the world isn't completely caught on in another decade because of the increasing population, increasing cost. I mean, you know, we're either in this together or it's going to be probably not a lot of fun. You know?
No, yeah, it's a great. I get this question a lot. You know, should I install solar today, or should I wait 5 years for when it's probably cheaper and probably more efficient? Mm-hmm. And you know, it's right. You're right. They're right. Whoever has that question is right. The technology will probably be more efficient and it will probably be cheaper in 5 years. Mm-hmm. But we're at the point sort of in the product life cycle mm-hmm. where you have two lines that are each approaching asymptotes. So you have the efficiency line. Mm-hmm. There it's getting more efficient, but the biggest efficiency gains have been realized over the last 10, 15 years, unless some totally new technology comes out of left field. And then the other one is a cost question. Over the last 10 to 15 years, the cost has decreased 90%. So yeah, 5 years from now, solar is going to be cheaper. But again, you're approaching that asymptote where you're never going to get to zero. It's going to cost something always. So I like to look at it, you know, I have a degree in finance and economics, and I like to look at it as an opportunity cost. You could wait 5 years to install this technology, but you're going to lose money along the way. So it's in everyone's best interest to install it now, regardless of where the efficiency or the cost may go in the future. Again, unless there's something that nobody's predicting that it's not even on the radar right now. Yeah.
Well, here's how I see it. I always look at what's the upside potential and the downside risk, and also what do we know today? And what we know today is a certainty. We have certainty with what we have today, technology wise. We don't have certainty 10 years down the road. We just don't know.
Yeah.
But the reality is if on average we can garner 10 to 12% savings, 16 to 18%, an average of 10 to 12. I mean, I'm going to do it because let's say 10 years later, it is half the cost to install it and it's twice as efficient. That's great. But in the meantime, I've probably doubled my money in saving in less than that time frame.
Yeah. It's that mentality, whether you're talking solar investing or whatever, there's always people, it's usually the more successful people that get started right now. Well, I'm just going to do it. It might be better in the future, but I don't care. It's good now. And then there's always a second group of people that are like, well, I'm going to wait a couple of years and sort of see what happens. And I mean, good luck, but do it on a property now and see how it goes. Maybe you have 1,000 unit portfolio or whatever. Do it on one and see how it works. And after you do it once, you're probably going to be convinced to roll it out over your whole portfolio.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, is there a way to ballpark like the average cost? I mean, maybe we'll take a single family home, a footprint of, 3,000 square feet, the ranch, the typical Southwestern ranch.
Yep.
Now I know there's other variables like the where you are, like Southwest, obviously you're going to have a lot more sun, like you described earlier. And you might not need as many panels to get the same savings as you would, say, like up in Ontario, Canada. You might need a lot more panels. But is there a way for people to kind of predict what they could spend on this, like for the average home, I guess,
Yeah. So the average, this is really dependent on where the house is located, how it's heated and cooled. Does it have a pool or a jacuzzi? Because all of that, and is it all electric or is there gas and electric? But just for consistency, let's say the average is a 10 kilowatt system. So that's 10. I'm doing math now on the fly in Excel because I love Excel. But so that's 10,000 watts. And your average panel is 400 watts. So this is actually a pretty big system. This is 25 panels. So maybe this is a little bit big for the average home, but let's just roll with it. The cost to install that is going to be about $27,000. That's, if you want to pay cash, that's your out of pocket. On average across the US, again, this fluctuates state to state, utility to utility. You're probably going to save about $5,500 a year on your electricity. So if you apply a 6 cap to that, you've just added $91,000 of value to your house. Right. Now, I know single family houses don't always apply with cap rates, but we deal mostly with multifamily. So we're always looking at value as created by NOI divided by cap rate. And so the other important thing to bring up here is now there's a 30% tax credit. So a lot of investors with single family homes have a W-2 job. So they're paying taxes every week, every other week when they get their paycheck. Well, of the $27,000 solar system, you will get a $9,000 federal tax credit, a dollar for dollar tax credit. So when you file your taxes, you will get $9,000 back.
Wow.
So now you're talking about an $18,000 system that saves $5,500 a year and creates $91,000 of value. Who's not going to do that?
Right.
And the numbers are so compelling. Everyone should look into it.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about a building, the first large building I bought. I went from, again, duplexes, fourplexes, then a 9-unit, an 11-unit, and on up. And it's got a 78-unit complex that was on 2 acres with 3 buildings. And I guess that was, forget 24 some odd units per building or something like that, 26 units per building. And so that was, and it was 4 stories. So they had, each building was a pretty good footprint.
Yeah.
And the roofs were traditional, asphalt shingle pitch roofs. I could have easily put, I don't own it anymore, but I could have easily put panels on that. And if you can imagine, it was central heat. So we had gas boiler heat.
Yep.
And if I could have converted or put in baseboard heaters, which we did, and we expanded some of the units, added bedrooms and so forth. And even if I probably did that alone and put the lighting on there. So we had the general lighting for the parking lot and the sidewalks and the exteriors and all that. And then we had interior hallway lighting plus, phone systems and security systems and the laundry room, which was electric. I mean, it goes on and on.
Yeah.
And our utility costs, as you can imagine, were quite large, for that complex. But if you wouldn't mind, take us through maybe an example of like something, because I know that it sounds like what you're doing is you're identifying projects, properties that people can buy collectively. You can participate as an investor. And one of the things you're doing that's a great calling card is you're showing how you can reduce costs with solar. And we always use something called cost segregation. We would depreciate the appliances faster than the building. We always did those things, but we're always looking for something else. And I think this is definitely the something else. So what would be what are the steps involved? Do you personally identify the buildings, or are you relying on other people to identify the opportunities for people to invest in and take us from there? We'll be right back with the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast after I invite you to Monday Night Live. Every Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, I teach a class without fail for you on subjects ranging from flipping to buying rentals, managing rentals, wholesaling, commercial, creative purchasing techniques, analyzing properties, identifying properties, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of subjects. And if you are a licensee, if you have a real estate license, you should definitely tap in, because there are a lot of investor agents also in the class. Many of them are on the global investor agent team. So you can learn from them, as well as from me, how to actually work with investors correctly and profitably. All right, we'll see you Monday night. The link is in the show notes. Go ahead and register. We'll get right to the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast.
Yeah. I'll get to the steps, but real quick on your story about the boiler. So This Inflation Reduction Act is something that people should definitely pay attention to. In that exact example, you would get about $14,000 per unit up to $14,000 per unit to electrify your boiler system.
Okay.
So, if you're looking at it pre-Inflation Reduction Act, it might cost you $150,000, $200,000 to electrify a gas boiler. But now you have the Inflation Reduction Act. Its whole goal is to electrify and decarbonize buildings. Yeah. So they're going to offer tax credits and rebates to electrify systems like that in all of your buildings. So it's something everyone should pay attention to. In terms of the steps, what we're doing at Rayven, we are identifying the properties, buying them, decarbonizing them, managing them, and then distributing interest payments to our investors.
Okay.
But we've gone down this rabbit hole a lot with other real estate investors. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't work out. We're happy. We ultimately want everyone in real estate investing to start incorporating solar into their properties. It makes financial sense. It makes environmental sense.
Right.
So we do advise occasionally people that own their own properties how to install solar, because like I said at the beginning, the solar contracting world is just, it's a muddy one. It's one that is hard to navigate and you can get taken advantage of. So we'll kind of fill that role occasionally too, because usually once someone has done it once if they own multiple properties, they're kind of comfortable doing it on properties 2 through however many they own.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So when you mention interest payments, so people can participate by providing funding. Do you ever do any other variation? Like, can people be equity partners or profit share partners? Or are you strictly looking for the financing part of it for? Okay.
Well, so for Rayven, Rayven is a crowdfunding real estate platform, and every property we buy is going to be true net zero, meaning our properties will produce as much clean energy on site as they consume, which is really, I would say, the highest mark in green real estate. It's something that not many other real estate companies can claim. We arrived on this business model because I had spent the last 3 years talking to institutional impact investors, in air quotes, people that say they're interested in impact. They market it, they talk about it a lot, but at the end of the day, they're really only interested in financial returns. And I just got really frustrated having these conversations over and over with these groups. And so I said that, I'm going to get burnt out if I have to keep having these conversations with these inauthentic people, organizations, whatever they may be. So we took a step back and said, what's another way we could raise money? And that's where this Regulation A offering came in. And so it's amazing because our minimum investment is $250. So pretty low barrier to entry.
Yeah.
And we're offering a 10% annual interest. So for your, retail investor, I'll call them, someone that doesn't spend every waking hour trying to figure out how to invest money, 10% is really good. We strategically designed this to have a low barrier to entry and a high interest rate to attract as many people as we could, because we don't care if investments are $250 or $25,000. We're trying to raise $75 million through as many investors as we can get in touch with. Mm-hmm. But to your point about, do we offer different sort of opportunities, depending on the check size, we'll do, more traditional sort of equity investments where it's not just you're signing a promissory note, you're an actual owner.
Okay.
It just depends on kind of who we're talking to. That's usually the more accredited investor route. A lot of Rayven investors are not accredited.
Gotcha.
And it's important to call out they don't need to be per the Regulation A guidelines.
Okay. And are the areas where you're looking at, we mentioned some of the states where there's we call them the smile states. If you look at the U.S., it's you can Washington State down to California, across all the way to Florida and up to Maine.
Yeah,
the smile. But I've been in all the lower 48 states. They all have something wonderful to offer. They really do.
Yeah.
And but are there areas that you're looking at more than others right now, or kind of what's your strategic plan, I guess, like for the remainder of this year or into like the next 3 years, perhaps something like that, as far as where you're looking to get the best deal?
Yeah, we are. Well, I think there's going to be some really interesting opportunities in the next year or two as all these bridge loans come due. But I don't think we're quite there yet. We're a cash flow oriented company. So, and the reason that we want to do that is when somebody invests into Rayven, we want to be able to start issuing interest payments as fast as possible. And it's a lot easier for us to do that if our properties cash flow from day one. So we're not really interested in, and this has changed over the years. With Z&E Capital, we took on really heavy value add stuff, but that's risky. It takes a lot of time. Your business model has to be executed flawlessly or pretty close to flawlessly in order to get the returns. And so now we're looking for more what I'll call operational value add. So a lot of times we're buying properties straight from the developers. These guys generally are really good at developing properties. They're not so good at managing properties. So there's a lot of operational efficiencies. And we're seeing close to the same returns as our heavy value add with a lot less risk. We're buying newer properties, so things built kind of 2012 and later in cash flowing areas, which is, I don't know what you call it. It's not smile states, but it's like South Dakota through Texas is where we're seeing a lot of opportunity. And we're opportunistic. We'll look at anything, but it's got to be cash flowing day one. That's like our minimum criteria. Yeah. And we do mostly garden style properties just because it has the most roof space. So you can install solar in a parking lot, like for a high rise, but it's more expensive on a per watt basis than it is to put it on the roof. So going back to sort of the economics of how we get our solar installations to work, we look for properties where we can put most of the solar, if not all of it, on the roofs. And that works best with garden style. Yeah.
Gotcha. You're just reminding me of something I've seen more and more in the last probably decade. I guess you call them solar farms. They're just vast, massive fields with nothing but solar panels. And I've even seen them, and I don't know, I guess this is all automated or programmed. I've actually seen where the panels are shifting. Like as I'm driving around, then you can see them shifting. I guess they're adjusting to the sun or something. Yeah. But they're actually manufacturing energy is what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't remember the most recent. So what the U.S. is doing strategically is there's no such thing as clean coal. There's no such thing as clean natural gas. I mean, those inherently are dirty. Sorry, natural gas and coal industry. Yeah. But in order to get a net zero economy, so an economy that does not emit greenhouse gases, it has to be all electric and it has to run entirely on renewable energy. And so again, to keep harping on the Inflation Reduction Act, that's like a $600 billion piece of legislation. And there's a lot of different areas that it's focused on, but a big one is electrifying. So if we electrify all of our homes and businesses, and in parallel, we're building solar farms and wind farms. I don't think we're building a lot of hydro. Nuclear is probably going to fall into this eventually. That's how you get sort of a clean grid. And then if everything is electric, it's running on a clean grid. So there's a lot of macroeconomic forces at play that, again, just kind of fell into our lap. Like we never in a million years thought the Inflation Reduction Act was going to get passed, but it did. And it helps our business model. So we're going to take advantage of it. Yeah.
Well, I always like to say, I know we get frustrated with what's on the news and what goes on in Washington, D.C., but I just think that in any organization, you're going to have some good people and some not so good people and everywhere else in between. But thankfully, there's enough level-headed people that see the value here. And I what's interesting, you mentioned hydro. I lived in London, Ontario for about 5 years. And of course, that whole region is powered by Niagara Falls. I mean, it's all hydro. And when it first was developed, probably 100 years or so ago, the swath of land that it supplied was well into the United States, and I mean, massive geographic area. But how many places have a Niagara Falls?
Yeah, exactly. And I think if you were to try and build a new hydro dam, there might be some pushback today. Yeah. But I mean, to your point about politics, not to get political, but I think it's the savvy business person that sort of takes the political lens off and says, this money is available. I'm going to use it to my advantage and make my projects better. And if you want to get caught in we should have never passed it, climate change isn't real, like fine, do that, but you're going to miss out and you're not going to win the long game.
I agree 100%. If your entrepreneurs really, generally don't really, when it comes down to it, they really don't care who's in office. What they care about is is there opportunity?
Exactly.
What's the upside potential? And this is brilliant legislation because it does address the climate. Number one. Number two is there's real incentives for business people to get involved. I mean, my gosh, you can't go wrong.
No,
hey, I know we're getting short on time, but is it possible to share an example or a case study, maybe your last one or your first one or something that I don't know if you're allowed to divulge the building or the area, but what was the cost, what was the project, and at the end, what are the savings, that kind of thing? Because I want people to really walk away from this, thinking that they need to do this because it's that important,
Yeah. So this is actually a deal. This is just this is the one that's sort of top of mind. This is one that we're working on for a different real estate owner. So we're sort of helping them evaluate solar. But the economics will hold true whether or not we own it. This is about a 500 unit property in South Carolina. The system size is about 1.2 megawatts. So it's a big system. That's 1,200,000 watts or 1,200 kilowatts. And honestly, we wanted to make it bigger, but we were confined by roof space. And again, it's most cost effective to keep this stuff on the roof. So we're just going to keep it at 1.2 megawatts. The production, and this will tie into sort of NOI, is about 1.7 million kilowatt hours. So that's how much energy the system will produce over a year. The gross cost of the system is about $3.3 million. So that's before any tax credit. This particular deal is an affordable one. So the tax credit's actually 40%.
Whoa.
So it goes from 30% to 40% if it's an affordable deal. It will go to 50% if it's an affordable deal in an energy community. An energy community is one that there's some percentage of jobs historically that have been tied to the fossil fuel industry. So some property owners can get half of their solar installation paid for by a tax credit, which now, thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, is transferable. Meaning I can take this federal tax credit of $1.3 million and I can find an individual or an organization with a federal tax liability of 1.3 million and I can sell it to them. So I can turn that tax credit into cash, which is totally new. You couldn't do that before the IRA. So that brings the net cost down to 1.9 million. That's the amount that will either be paid, in cash or will be financed most likely. And then the NOI, the solar NOI, I like to call it, is you take the 1.7 million kilowatt hours and you multiply it by the cost of electricity, which is about 13 cents a kilowatt hour, and it generates $200,000 a year in NOI. So if you pay cash, that's an additional $200,000 a year you'll generate in cash flow. If you finance it, the financing cost is probably going to be about $150,000 a year. So you're not paying any money out of pocket and you're creating $50,000 a year in cash flow.
Right.
So this is a big installation. And you're creating $50,000 without spending a dime of your own money because you're financing it and you're doing the right thing for the environment. It just seems so obvious, but I think it's new and it's confusing to a lot of real estate owners. So I think we're going to start to see kind of the adoption tick up over the next few years.
Yeah. Well, the thing too is the financing obviously is temporary. It's not a permanent thing. And then also the fact that the tax incentive is transferable, and that's pretty amazing,
It's huge. Yeah.
So when you were saying affordable, you're referring to the properties that also fall into the affordable housing designation?
So if it's a tax credit deal,
okay,
I think you can go up to 50% tax credit. If it's a naturally occurring affordable deal where, you have
gotcha.
in your loan documents, you have certain units at 80% AMI, certain at 90% AMI, et cetera, you can go up to 40% tax credit.
Okay.
So this is a naturally occurring affordable deal.
Okay. Well, that's pretty awesome. And I tell you what, I know we probably slightly over it, but I love the subject, extremely timely. And a lot of people don't realize this program's even out there, It's a shame the press, I guess we can all pick on the press. They only show us the worst of the worst that happened in any given day. And the fact is, very bad piece of news, there's like 1,000 pieces of news,
Yeah, 100%.
Yep. And, if it takes guys like you to make sure that gets out there on the airways, and I'm glad to help out there. But so how can people, I've got a feeling there's a lot of people right now thinking, okay, well, Gary, I want to be involved. I'll take 10%.
Yeah.
What's the best way for them what's the best thing they could do? Read a report, go to the website.
Yeah.
Fill us in,
Yeah. So the website is joinrayven.com. That's Rayven with a Y. So join Rayven, RAYVEN.com.
Mm-hmm.
You can sign up to make an account right away. You can sign up to watch either a pre-recorded webinar or a live webinar. Our sort of, basic email address is invest@joinrayven.com. So send any questions there. And then all our social media channels are @joinrayven. Again, Rayven with a Y, RAYVEN.
Gotcha. Okay. So it's joinrayven.com. And if you want to email us, invest@joinrayven.com. And then all the handles have the Raven. Okay. All right. Well, this is pretty cool. I think I speak for a lot of people when I say thank you, Owen, for doing this. And for everybody listening, if you could please, again, leave a review for this. Whatever channel you use, of course, Apple's the biggest one. So go to joinrayven.com, then go leave a review on your favorite podcast channel. And before you leave, go to globalinvestoragent.com and select an investor agent for you, because we're going to make sure these guys know all about this. And the agents will be able to help you, get a hold of the right person and work with Owen and his team. So take full advantage of that. And you guys take care of yourselves. We will see you on the next Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. And Owen, thanks again from me and from a lot of people for spending your valuable time doing this,
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, folks, we'll see you on the next Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. Take care of yourselves, and God bless you and your families.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Massive Passive Cash Flow. Be sure to go to realestatewithgarywilson.com to join our community and start building wealth today.